Well, hey everybody, and welcome to episode 22 of the Pixar Post Podcast. As usual, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And in this episode, we are going to take a look at the news as well as some interesting reactions to the Blue Umbrella not being included or omitted from the 2014 Oscars. It's not even going to be nominated, as well as a follow-up to our episode 21 discussion where we talked with Michael Makarovich, who is a supervising animator on Toy Story of Terror. So, the Blue Umbrella.
Yeah.
Okay, so we wanted to do this podcast.
Shocking, first off.
Yes. So to level set here a little bit, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences released their list of animated full-length features that will advance to the next round of voting before the final list that'll be actually nominated for an Oscar comes out. And Monsters University was included among 18 other films in the initial round. So that's great news.
Oh, that's spectacular news.
Very happy to hear it. But what kind of threw us for a loop, and a lot of other people it seems, is that the category of animated short film, there's 10 short films that advanced in this first round, but that did not include at all the Blue Umbrella. So this is the first time since 2009 with Peter Sohn's Partly Cloudy that Pixar wasn't nominated within this category. Now, obviously, us being Pixar fans, we're a little spoiled in this sense. Mm-hmm. We see a lot of nominations. And unfortunately, because of that, and because of our passion that Pixar fans have for it, much like Apple fans have for the products that Apple releases, there's an expectation that it does happen. And when it doesn't, it kind of sends a little bit of a shockwave out there. And it makes you wonder, why?
You know what, exactly. It's funny because when we heard about this, I think I was more shocked because I was like, I thought it was for sure going to be nominated. I mean, you know, the animated short films, there's so many great short films. There's so many different styles of art and animation that are always in this category. But for me, I guess I was taken aback because, I mean, and you hate to say, like, you feel like something's like a shoo-in, like, oh my gosh, this...
That's what I was saying. We're, like, spoiled.
Yeah.
We just assume that it's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, you know, there's been so many shorts where I'm like, oh gosh, you know, yeah, that really has a good, you know, a good chance. But for some reason, like, I felt it, that, like, I felt the Blue Umbrella was going to win.
Yeah, so let's...
And I guess that's... I know that for people, like, in the awards, that's kind of, like, you know, taboo. You're not supposed to do that. It could be, like, jinxing, but I really did feel like it was going to win.
Well, we never talked about it, so you can think it.
Yeah, I did.
You can think it all you want. You didn't say it, and that's not jinxing anything. Yeah. So the first question I have is why, and that's the first reaction I had. And to also tell the listeners, Julie and I did resist telling each other too much of our own initial reactions because we wanted to get them to come out on this podcast so that way we could try to keep things as real as possible.
Right.
So my first comment that I had was, why? I want a reason. Like, it literally was almost like, I wasn't angry, but it was almost like, well, that's just stupid. Why not?
Yeah.
That was my first reaction, was why not? And I want an answer. But what's funny is, you know, the initial round of nominations happen, and they obviously, you know, they don't owe anything to anybody out there. But it's interesting because I really want to know.
I know. And I mean, you can't discount the 10 films that are moving ahead, but I just see... I don't know. For me, I just kind of felt in my heart that, you know, there was something so beautiful and something so different about the Blue Umbrella, visually speaking. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't know. I'm just still in bewilderment.
When you said that you don't want to put down or disrespect the other 10 movies that are moving on, so the next comments that we're going to talk about, it could come across that way, but that's clearly not our intent. So... one of the things that we did in the post that you wrote up initially about this news is you had gone out and found the websites where it has the trailers, any type of information.
Yeah, I found trailers and information regarding the 10 short films that are advancing to the voting process for the nominations for the Oscars. And it's funny because, I'm looking through them, and yes, they are visually, wonderful films. I can't get the whole storyline because I can't see the full short film. But, a lot of them have already won awards throughout the, short film process, like in festivals,
right? Other festivals that they've entered.
And it seems like the storylines are interesting, but I mean, granted, we run a Pixar site, so we're biased. There was probably 2 films that I was like, oh God, I was very interested to see what the rest of them, the rest of it
Correct.
was.
I completely agree.
Yeah, and I won't say what films.
Okay.
I could. But Feral is one of them.
Okay. That was one I was interested in. It didn't hurt that George Takei was the narrator on that.
Yeah.
That one made it very interesting.
To me, the animation was a little different.
Yep.
So it caught my eye.
Did you have one other one?
What was yours?
Room on the Broom.
Okay. That was one of mine, but
that was a pretty long one. I was surprised. That was like 20-some minutes, 26 minutes or something like that for that full short.
But, I'll just say the Feral one, but to me, something still is sticking out with the Blue Umbrella for me. I guess it's just the photorealism. It just looks so real. I don't know, I'm a sucker for detail, and, granted, there is detail in the other 10 short films. It's just a different level. They're different animation styles.
Now, I will tell you that, and again, I know that this is us, and I'll stop qualifying it after this, but there was a couple of these that when I was watching them and getting more research on them, I kept saying to myself, this is just ridiculous. And I don't want to come across as, disappointed, but I was disappointed.
Yeah.
And it really, it's real. It really did.
It's your real reaction.
It bothered me. And there were a few of them that literally, when I got done watching even the trailer on some of them, I almost had like the heebie-jeebies. And I was like, I want to walk away from something visually, and I don't have to feel lifted up. Monsters University, although it lifts you up a little bit, it still had that heavy undertone of you can try as hard as you want, but you still may not achieve your dreams. And I don't have to walk away with the team celebrating the biggest victory ever, but I want to walk away at least feeling like there was something that makes me want to know more, to learn more, to think about it more. And there was a couple of these that, honest to goodness, like
scared you.
I got like the heebie-jeebies. I got like, seriously, like I got like heavy feeling, and it was like disappointment after watching it. I'm like, that is so dark, creepy, and depressing. And to me, because of that, like I said, there's no way to not make it sound like we're putting down one or some of the other shorts that are nominated. But I feel like it is a blatant. It's the fact that it's not included. There's something wrong.
Yeah, I definitely.
When I'm comparing it against the fact that, the others, when we've watched parts of them, and again, we cannot be fully unbiased because we haven't seen the full shorts for all of them, because some of them are not offered as the full shorts. It's only the trailers, as you mentioned.
Right. Get a Horse, you can't even see a clip of that. Right. You can only see some artwork for that.
Right.
That's another one that looks, it's has my interest.
Exactly.
Just because it's kind of going back to the old Mickey style of way back when.
Yeah, there's one that's full on, almost like psychedelic, where it's almost a mix of animation and
like paint strokes, like paint styles.
Yeah, it's really out there. And again, art is art; it's all subjective, so it has to be just based on our feelings. But knowing what people know about Pixar, the time that they put in, the technical advancements that they put in, the detail work. The detail work is sickening on this.
I know.
On the Blue Umbrella. And I think that that's one thing that has come across. So one of the things that we wanted to do is we did the post a day ago. We asked people right away, give us your reactions. We're going to do an on-the-spot podcast. And we had several people respond back. We had a couple voicemails, things like that. So I wanted to summarize some of them. And let's maybe look at, through their comments, mirrored with some of ours, if we can determine what the general consensus is as to why this was omitted.
Okay.
And I believe that there's one common thread among everything that you've said, whether you realize it or not, and something that I felt and also talked with you about. But so the first one here is from Derek R. And he says, quote, "I am just as shocked as you guys. After watching some of those trailers for the shorts that are moving ahead, I just don't see the level of expertise as in the Blue Umbrella. Sure, those other films deserve just as much credit, as many look to be independent films, but there is something to be said that the level of animation that was done with the Blue Umbrella that hadn't been done before." Okay, so that's the first one. Mm-hmm. So let that simmer. So the second one, Josh S., I apologize. He had a very common sentiment and actually mirrored almost exactly the words that I said to you when we first heard the news as well. And Josh said, "I thought it was absolutely beautiful and had a simple yet effective story. My guess as to why it wasn't included in the Oscar race is because of the similarities to last year's Paperman short from Disney Animation. I think that since they are kind of similar, the Oscar people didn't want to necessarily repeat themselves." Okay, so that is exactly what I said to you. Is it too similar to Paperman?
Just the love story aspect of it?
It follows that kind of, there's, the communication as far as vocals aren't there. It's more based on the visual and the music. Mm-hmm. It's based on two people that kind of get thrust together but then separated and don't know how they're going to get back together. Okay, so I'll continue along. Okay. So Dave P. chimes in, and he says that he strongly agreed with Josh's comments and said, "While I think it should be considered, I agree with Josh about the similarities with Paperman. I absolutely loved Paperman last year and was happy to see it win the award. The Blue Umbrella story was very similar, just different visuals. Excellent visuals, by the way. It's great to see Pixar still doing shorts, and these are helping push forward what can be done in animation." Okay? Mm-hmm. So we'll see if you're pulling out a common thread here. And then finally, Ben Z noted that, well, although I'm very disappointed that they didn't include the Blue Umbrella, I can kind of see why. Artistically and visually, it's basically a game changer for Pixar. But the story was simple and predictable. Nothing wrong with that, but maybe just not what the Academy was looking for. Okay, so what is the common thread sentiment among all those comments and what you and I have said?
The love story that's similar to what won last year.
Okay, so, but what stands out as the strong portion?
You tell me.
The visual elements.
Oh, of course, the visual elements.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe it was just, I just said it was too obvious. But honestly, I think that's what it comes down to. I think for some reason, whoever that nominating panel was this year, they weren't paying attention to those extra cues of the visual aspects, and for some reason felt like
they were hooked on a story.
The story.
But do you also think that because maybe the photorealism they felt was too on par to live action CG, and maybe that it wasn't, they felt like it wasn't an animation feat, that this technology's already been around, so to have an animation, maybe they didn't know how hard and difficult all that work that the Blue Umbrella team and, everyone at Pixar did to create that in, animation form rather than just have it live action CG, to have a whole short film done that way. Do you think maybe they were like, this looks like it's, live action and we've seen that before and on Thor and all, just...
So maybe that's a great point. I hadn't thought of that. I'm thinking of it all from the technical aspects, how great the reflections of light were, how great the concrete looked.
Oh, I'm all those,
I know you and your
concrete and rain.
Right. But, so yes, all those elements, you're right.
But the panel, do you think they maybe didn't think that it was as maybe challenging to put it for consideration?
I don't know if they wonder if it was as challenging. What I like the point that you made, though, is when you talked about has it already been done?
Right.
It's new to us as Pixar fans because it hasn't been done within Pixar. But are they looking at it from an unobjective mind and saying, okay, has this been done before? And is the story too simplistic and or similar to last year's Paperman?
Well, I don't think I think they're looking at it as it hasn't been done before, but it's been, I think they're looking at, it looks like it's been done before in live action. That animation style
right.
with live action. It's never been done before in like short animated form, animation form. I mean, I kind of remember most of the short films that have been nominated as of recent years, but
sure.
I've never seen anything.
Well, usually if you're doing a short film, you don't have the budget that you're putting forward to do a big budget kind of scenario that Pixar can usually do.
Right.
So that's why they're usually not as CG intensive, because small firms are usually doing small short films typically.
Right.
Which, in the case of Pixar, they're doing
lighting.
it.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry to just cut you off, but the lighting in the Blue Umbrella, just like you were saying, those reflections in the water, the neon lighting that's fuzzy because of fog from the rain, the dew and stuff. Oh my gosh.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it would have won or not, against one of the other films, it's just
and that is where I feel like the big problem is it still should have been nominated. It still should have been nominated.
Completely agree with you.
Based on what it was, what it is, it absolutely should have. And, it was the story of the linchpin. Was it too similar? Was that the linchpin to Paperman? I think if that is the reason that it's too similar to Paperman, that is a even more of a blatant omission, because that should have no representation of what happened last year to this year.
Well, no, because then you could look at that with other films that have you
could say any romantic comedy that follows the same storyline should never be nominated from year 1 to year 2. Right.
Yeah, I mean, how many
Right.
I mean.
So okay, so you mentioned the lighting, the concrete, all those things. The one area that I feel that should have been looked at a deeper level too was when we interviewed Sashka back in March. He talked about how we asked him a question about the handheld movement, and he talked about how great that was, how they had recorded it kind of standard in the using their normal camera staging and layout and all those kind of things, but then they did a handheld recording to get and see what those natural handheld motions would be and built those in. That is way too cool. I mean, if you look
involved.
Yes, absolutely. And then if you think about the score on top of it, they brought in a very, well-known and well-revered composer. They had an original artist doing with Sarah
vocals.
Jaffe doing the vocals in the background of it. It's just, there's too many things about this if you think about the level of complexity, and that's mirrored in everybody's comments. It was a
very visually piece of art. It was a visual piece of art from your visuals, to your all sensories, really. I mean, besides touch, if you watch it in the rain, then you can
watch it in the rain.
But I mean,
she's gone off the deep end.
Everything was so artistic and just, I keep using that word, but it really was just stunning.
Yeah.
And I'm just shocked still.
I agree completely. And so, okay, the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that the bottom line is that although we feel it was a mistake, although the readers that have reached out to us felt it was a mistake, we have to remember that Pixar doesn't make films to win an award. And the award does not make the work worth it. It validates it in some way, but since art is subjective, we need to also remember and take the emotional element out of it, that the work is done, the artistry is already in place, and whether somebody else gets it or not is individual of what it truly did achieve.
Right.
So that's the one thing I want to take away from this. They're obviously not making it to win an award, and no matter what, it matters what we think. What the readers think. It matters what you personally feel for the short.
And we also wrote in the post, just saying every theater, viewing that we had seen, there was audible gasps of people thinking that it was live action. And then when they realized that it's all animation, and then applause at the end, to me, it not being considered for an Oscar. That right there. I mean, I wish we could, capture all of those audiences' reactions into a bubble and send it,
Right.
to the whole crew. So,
Right.
I mean, that right there is a winning moment. It's in itself.
Okay, so here's the final thought I'm going to put on this, and then we're going to go to our next topic here, and about the follow-up from Michael Makarovich's interview, is apparently Pixar should not do anything in a short film that involves any type of bad weather. Partly Cloudy, The Blue Umbrella. They both didn't get nominated. No more bad weather.
No, I think third time's a charm.
Oh, okay.
They need to do one called Thunderstorm.
Thunderstorm.
Lightning Bolt.
Oh, boy. Okay, so in the last episode 21, we interviewed Michael Makarovich, which again was the supervising animator. Or no, I'm sorry. Yes, supervising animator. Am I correct here?
Yes.
By the way, why is my mind jumping off the boat here? For Toy Story of Terror. And one of the questions that our reader had submitted to us that we asked him was about the animation dailies, where he talked about that, do you have to show your work in the dailies daily? And he said, no, you don't have to. Obviously, it's a very open environment and, you're welcome to. But if you do feel like you need a little more time, you can have it. Again, like we mentioned, not forever, but you can have a little bit of it. Well, Jeff from This Day in Pixar had found an article on Craig Good's new blog. And Craig Good, for anybody that may not know, is a 30-year Pixar veteran that has done everything within the company. I mean, he started out at the Lucasfilm days. He's done camera staging, layout work. The list goes on and on. He's very revered as a very senior person and is a very senior person within Pixar. So he started up a blog to kind of pass along some of the information that he's learned. We're going to put a link to this article in our show notes, but we strongly recommend anybody that's looking to get into animation or just learn a little bit more in regards to creativity or leadership, definitely check this out. So, things that Craig mentions, he expands upon the dailies talk, and how important it is to be able to openly share your work and not take your criticism personally. So another element besides just presenting the work and being open is that you need to be open to ideas and take the criticism professionally. It's not against you. Okay, so here's what he says. Learning to separate yourself from your work, from the work you are doing, is one of the hardest lessons to learn in any artistic field. Quite understandably, the person who has labored lovingly over a screenplay, novel, drawing, sculpture, or building design can easily take criticism of their work personally. Our creations are our babies. Tell me that my dialogue is clunky, my photograph improperly framed, my building uninhabitable, and I'm perfectly justified in feeling that you're attacking me, right?
Right.
Only if you're an amateur.
Oh.
Steely-eyed professionals understand that notes should be taken personally, should never be taken personally. They have thick skins and ice water coursing in their veins. They know better than to get emotionally invested in what they've created. Now, hang on. Here's where he comes back with something that's kind of like what people think, what should be ideal, but then he comes back around and says, if you believe that last paragraph, I have some prime beachfront real estate for you in Florida. It's true that pros make it about the work, but it's still hard. Of course they feel it, but the right culture, atmosphere, and attitude can get people to a healthy place where it really is about the work. So that is fantastic.
That is a very profound piece of, knowledge right there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and we've heard it before when you were at the Monsters University press event,
right,
and Peter Sohn was doing his little snack time.
Yes.
He was mentioning that it's not about the work. You can tell that Pixar is really trying to drive.
It's not about the ego.
Yeah, it's not about you. It's about the work. Yes. Sorry. State that wrong again here. So when Craig talks about that right culture, continuing along from what Michael said, continuing along to what Craig just said, there's also another video with Kelsey Mann, who is a story supervisor on Monsters University, where he mentions that in the dailies, again, bringing this all back to the dailies and presenting your information, that there are two things that are required. And one is never interrupt somebody in the middle of their pitch. Out of respect, you're watching them; they're presenting their
They have
work.
a flow going.
They have a flow. You don't want to break that. And number two is you applaud at the end of it. So that is fostering the right culture.
Most definitely.
And I think that all ties back together, everything from what Michael was saying to what Craig was saying to what Kelsey is saying. I think that is the most important thing, that as we learn more about the field of animation, as we learn more about Pixar, that's something that we definitely want to make sure that everybody understands. That is one of the biggest things that Pixar is pushing out in many conversations. So if you're looking to get in animation, if you're looking to just foster a more creative environment, anything like that, take that advice. And I love when people are real about it. Like Craig says, yeah, you're going to take it personally, but if you're a professional, you shouldn't. But it's still hard.
It's still hard.
It's still
there. It's the underlying feeling is going to still be there.
Right, but you need to separate yourself from it as much as possible. And I think that's something that, all of us can take.
I think all of us struggle with that too. I mean, you want to separate yourself. I mean, I think just like you were going to say, when I was creating something like
Partysaurus Rex. Yep. What did I say to you one time?
The tentacles on his octopus wig, one just wasn't right, and you told me,
and I said blatantly,
yeah, that's not right. That's
not your best work.
Yeah. And I remember feeling like, what the?
Yeah.
Like I've made 4 of these, and this one's not great. Like what do you mean?
Right.
And
I remember you were visibly distraught by that.
Yeah, I was a little taken aback, but then what I do? I mean, I started over, and it was incredible. I took your words. I listened to the notes, and
it took a while to sink in.
Yeah.
And what's funny is
it's funny, like looking back on that, it's just like, gosh, you said it coming from a good place. You were giving me a good note. Do I want to do something that was subpar, or do I want to make it right? I want to make it right. So if you see something that doesn't look right, and I visually couldn't see it because I'm too involved in the project.
Mm-hmm. Too close to it.
Yeah, too close to it. I couldn't step back from it. You were removed from it, so you gave me that good note. But yeah, no, it was hard, but Well,
I can tell you an example where you did the same thing, and you were like telling me, you're like, you got to just, buckle down and do this again. Not about the dream journal.
Oh, okay.
It was actually, I know that's what you were thinking, but that's because I was saying I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
That was you just giving me motivation to do it.
I knew you could create that thing.
But a scenario that I drew something that you said it's not right and do it again was when I was drawing
seagulls. The seagulls from Finding Nemo.
I forgot about that one. Yes, you did. But the one that I'm thinking of the most that really, really got to me was when I was drawing the 3 triplet bears from Brave, and I was drawing it. It's one of the first couple things I was drawing on the iPad, and you said the bear on the left. I was done with all 3 of them. The bear on the left, his head wasn't right.
Yeah.
You're like, it doesn't look right as opposed to the other 2, and it's supposed to be the same bear turned, from the front, side, and back. And so I said, I can't. You know what? I actually felt offended. I'm like, what do you mean you don't like it? And
no, I completely remember this. This was over a year ago now.
Oh yeah, because of how much work I had put into it, and I was testing out things, and then
that was like days, I think, because
it was over the course of an evening.
I just thought it was like maybe 2 days that you were working on that. In between
I might have started it the day before just to get a test, but I did the full run of it the one day in one day. But the problem with the iPad, and another reason that I was doubting it, is because of the limitations of the iPad. There's a little bit of frustration associated with it because I was afraid, if I do this, am I going to screw it up for good? Because you can put as many layers as you want, but I hadn't built all of those layers properly to just cut his head off and redraw his head.
Because that's before you had your Wacom tablet.
Exactly. That's before I had the Wacom 5. So I had to do it just on the iPad, and it was completely nerve-wracking. And I said, okay, after taking a couple hours, I finally erased it straight off. Mm-hmm. And I said, I hope I can do this again. But it's, again, looking back on it, as much as it hurt hearing it, now I look at it and I like it way more.
And it's funny because, when you said stuff to me and when I've said stuff to you, it's not malicious. It's not mean.
It comes across that way when you don't want to hear it.
You never want to hear it.
Right. You want people to walk in and go, "Oh, it's great.
Oh my gosh, it's so good." And then you're like, "Okay, well that part's good, but that part, like
right.
one of the main parts, I mean, that you have to like redo everything."
Well, I know you had to, like Party Source Rex, you had to take off his helmet.
Everything.
You had to redo the hair, the whole shot. Yeah.
The helmet, everything.
Right. Yeah.
But
it worked out better in the end.
Yeah, same with you. So
yeah.
it's a really good note from Craig. So.
Yeah, and and again, it's following. It's kind of. I'm glad Jeff found that because first off, I wasn't aware of Craig Good's new blog, so I'm definitely going to be following that because he's going to be putting out some of those great insights that he's garnered over 30 years.
And he always does some really good Q&As on the Quora website.
Right, which is essentially a website where people go out, they just throw out general questions, and then other people that are considered like experts or have
ties to the field
just answer them randomly for people, which is actually a really cool website. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he's one that he talks about in this very article that we're referencing, that I read part of it, that people were kind enough to give him information, so now he's going to try to give some information. Which
is pretty phenomenal, especially someone with 30 years in this industry.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know this because I don't know enough of Craig Good's history, but he said he started as a janitor.
Oh, I did not know
At Lucasfilm.
At Lucasfilm?
Yeah.
Well, 30 years ago.
I don't know if he was just trying to get his foot in the door and that was true, or if he was basically kind of saying that from the standpoint of I was so low. Yeah. I don't know because I haven't seen enough of that out there to really be able to follow up on it truly. Obviously, you take him for his word. But anyways, all right, so that's what we wanted to pass along in this episode. Just get our feelings and emotions out there. Very therapeutic about the Blue Umbrella.
I'd be curious if any of our listeners or readers would have like a moment like we just shared of someone like either whether they're in like art school or anything where they've been so close to a project and someone's like, hey, redo that, and then how it came out. Like
right. Was it better? Do you feel like you compromised and it ruined your original vision?
Or do you feel like that made you better as an artist or, whatever it was?
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see if anyone
share it with us. Either put it, give us a comment, send us an email, put it on the forum under, one of the different categories for, the learning and being at Pixar and wanting to get to Pixar, being an artist, those types of things. If a category is not there and you want to start it, start it. Mm-hmm. So like I said, we wanted to pass along the Blue Umbrella news and then also that great tie-in to the dailies and all those types of things that we were just talking about there. So, all right, well, that about wraps up episode 22 of the Pixar Post Podcast. Signing off as usual, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And be sure to stay tuned to PixarPost.com all week for the latest Pixar news.